Hi, hope you're well. Thank you for taking a bit of time out to listen to the Rich Fritzke Show. It's good to have you with us. Just out of high school, I would, still mourning the tragic loss of Bobby Kennedy just 2 months earlier, attend the 1968 Democratic National Convention in Chicago anyway, in support of the anti-Vietnam War maverick, Senator Eugene McCarthy of Minnesota. The ends were predetermined in that he didn't have a snowball's chance. The party establishment intended to and would slam dunk Vice President Hubert Horatio Humphrey home. There I became well acquainted with the taste of tear gas, took notice of the tanks and the soldiers atop every overpass, and joined in the candlelight vigil at the end, protesting the party's continued support of what was the madness of Vietnam. Notably, Mayor Richard Daley of Chicago had put together a force of 12,000 police officers, 6,000 National Guardsmen, 6,000 Army troops, 1,000 FBI officers, 25,000 altogether. The mayor set the terms, and the word went forth that no matter how peaceful the anti-war protesters, they were to be put down. It was an unwarranted brutality, as no matter where they gathered, they met ugly and wholly unjustified beatings. The rioting and what was referred to as the Battle of Michigan Avenue were literally instigated by the mayor's force. Everywhere and in every way, the Bill of Rights was trampled upon. This awful, undemocratic Democratic convention notwithstanding, the 1968 takeaway for me forever revolved entirely upon the loss of Bobby. 52 years ago now, and it still hurts. On race, poverty, and justice. It was the premature loss of Abraham Lincoln in the 19th century and the premature loss of Bobby in the 20th century that entirely and so very negatively redefined the contours of history. Both Lincoln's commitment freed from the war to raise everyone up in the race of life, and Kennedy's freed from the Vietnam War to make gentle the life of the world, never took flight, when they most certainly would have, had both of them lived. Bobby's go-to line still ring in my ears. George Bernard Shaw's, "Some men see things as they are and say why. I dream things that never were and say why not." And Aeschylus's, "In our sleep, pain which cannot forget falls drop by drop upon the heart until in our despair, against our will, comes wisdom through the awful grace of God." So taken was Bobby, champion and mystic, with the harsh poverty, the suffering and degradation of the lives of so many Americans, that he often cried, openly cried. I can still see the tears glistening in his eyes, sadness oozing out of every pore of his body. He was just wired differently. Unlike all others, he melted right in front of you. He bled out, determined, as he so beautifully said, to tame the savageness of man and make gentle the life of the world. As his brother, Senator Ted Kennedy, said at his funeral, "My brother need not be idealized or enlarged in death beyond what he was in life, to be remembered simply as a good and decent man who saw wrong and tried to right it, saw suffering and tried to heal it, saw war and tried to stop it. Those of us who loved him and who take him to his rest today, pray that what he was to us and what he wished for others will someday come to pass for all the world." Sadly, such has never come to pass, and our present leadership lifts not a damn finger. I've spent a lifetime commiserating with Bobby about this, doing my own so very small bit, serving on state commissions and task forces and councils, and working with my once uniquely progressive business service organization in the Meadowlands to forge nonprofits that targeted everything from transportation to jobs, jobs development, and job training, to adult literacy education and adopt-a schools, to youth services for students at risk and both affordable and transitional housing and alternative schooling. 2 among them lived on. Meadowlink, which first found a way back in my day to get residents of Newark, Jersey City, and Patterson without automobiles to the jobs in the Meadowlands. It was servicing tens of thousands of New Jersey commuters before this pandemic. And while the Kenmare Alternative High School for unwed mothers has gone remote, the St. Joseph's Transitional Housing Complex in Jersey City still hums. But we're too calm and indifferent today. Maybe we'll be different on the other side of this pandemic. At least I pray. For we all ought to be enraged, as all of our individual contributions and enoughs will never be enough unless and until government buys in big time and President Trump buys in not at all. Not long after the 50th anniversary of Bobby's assassination, I was able to visit his gravesite, to sit by that unassuming, simple white cross at Arlington. It felt good to be there, to be with him in spirit on a sunny and balmy early summer's afternoon. And while small parades of people visited his brother, Jack's grave above, nary a soul bothered Bobby and I. How little did they know, I thought. For while Jack was an explorer who would tinker, Bobby was the mystical true believer who would have moved the damn mountains. I also attended, as it happened, the 1972 Democratic National Convention in Miami, then with Mayor Ken Gibson, the first African-American mayor of Newark, New Jersey, for whom I wrote. He was to have seconded the nomination of Senator George McGovern of South Dakota for president, but he would get bumped, and he wound up giving the nominating speech for Senator Thomas Eagleton of Missouri for vice president. Accordingly, I was among the first before the newspaper headlines asked the same thing the next day to ask, "What's a Thomas F.X. Eagleton?" before everyone else did. For as it happened, all the big guns in the party at the time were saying no, no, no to McGovern's pleas to join him on the ticket, largely because they read the tea leaves and recognized that far too many party regulars were going to take a walk and sit out what they looked upon as the co-opting of their party by those damn upstart progressives. There would soon be a sad debacle, and the sadly abused Eagleton would be relieved and thrown off the ticket just a few weeks later. And Sergeant Shriver, the Kennedys' brother-in-law of Peace Corps fame, would join the ticket. As it happened, I would be on my way to Boston to work for Mayor Kevin Hagan White a couple of months later, where I soon learned that he, too, had been a pre-Eagleton vice presidential pick. He had said yes to McGovern, got on a plane to Miami, only to be called en route with a forget about it, thanks but no thanks. Unbelievably outrageous, and too bad, for White was a warrior, a fiery candidate who would have lit it up and energized a campaign that never quite found its footing. Indecision, pure, unadulterated indecision by McGovern had in fact crippled his campaign at the outset. He was a decent man, a vehement opponent of the war in Vietnam that was closing in on some 50,000 dead soldiers and countless Vietnamese. Fruitless, meaningless, just horrific. It had stolen our innocence and rendered America cold and stoic. Incoming mortar fire took my cousin Dave Cassidy at the age of 19. Dave, just 4 months older than I, the lifeguard at Crater Lake, who I pinch hit for, the one who taught me to drive. It took my Troop 5 Boy Scout Senior Patrol Leader, John Tomini, who had the wonder of that so strong and so very gentle and kind combo down. He saved me when I was freezing on the night of my first camping trip. And while he longed to save others, the helicopter he flew to retrieve the wounded was blown out of the sky. It took others from Hackensack as well, One a close friend of my brother Bob's, Jimmy Kovacs, and one of my Seton Hall prep classmates. Still others like my close friend Paul, who always got the girl and had a sense of humor to beat the band. Oh, he came home all right, just never fully, as mind, heart, and spirit were forever broken. The fullness of life, as well as that great sense of humor, were just gone. And my big brother Frank, my attic roommate, as strong a guy as I had known, came home just like the sweet heart of a brother that he always was, only to awake in horror, reliving something too awful to comprehend, night after night and month after month. But in 72, the anti-war candidate McGovern, well, he'd carry but one lonely state, Massachusetts, the Lone Star State, and the District of Columbia, in a crushing loss to the incumbent Richard Nixon, who would never have been president had my beloved Bobby lived. All that I've here related sets the table for this one simple and, to me, good story, one that is spot on true. Well, I had a room of my own at a more flea-bitten motel miles out on the Strip in Miami. The McGovern campaign was headquartered at the Doral, and I and a friend, Jay Biggins, had actually been sleeping on the 6th-floor room of a friend and his wife, Pete and Peggy Curtin. Pete was Gibson's chief of staff, and I was there to be at his and the mayor's beck and call. And Jay, with whom I had recently administered a statewide voter registration drive, well, Jay was hanging with me. So after all the hoopla on the night of McGovern's nomination, Jay and I simply wanted to get up to the 22nd floor, or the top floor of the Doral, to have a beer in one of those nice bars overlooking the Atlantic there. But we sadly discovered that the security pins that had been assigned to us allowed access only up to the 6th floor, not beyond. Please understand that we were entirely innocent, as was our objective. Tired as we were, late as it was, sweaty as we had been that day, disheveled as we looked, that alone was what we were after. But as we could not get there by elevator, we used our limited charm and enticed a compassionate maid to open the maintenance stairwell for us. We would climb to the 22nd floor. There, no one stood in our way. And after the 20th and panting, the lighting dimmed, and before the 22nd floor, we were ascending in absolute darkness. We opened the door at the end of the trail and stumbled into, yes, more darkness, proceeding to bump into stainless steel tables of sorts in what we assumed to be an abandoned kitchen. Yet there in the distance, there was the light shining below, sifting through the base of an inviting door and leading us, no doubt, to our promised land. Nirvana we were in, but little did we realize where. That I knew most of the people I saw, and I did, upon passing through that swinging door, did not comfort, for none of them, and I mean none of them, knew Jay or I. Immediately before us were Marlo Thomas, now renowned for the wonder of St. Jude's Children's Hospital in Memphis, but the then star of a popular sitcom, That Girl. She was chatting with Robert Vaughn, who starred in another popular TV show, The Man from U.N.C.L.E. Rounding out the trio was the famous Shirley MacLaine. We noticed Frank Mankiewicz, McGovern's campaign manager, with Gary Hart, who would soon be a senator from Colorado, and Senator Ed Muskie of Maine loomed in the distance. And we could have just tripped over Senator Gaylord Nelson of Wisconsin, as he was immediately to our right. Everywhere we looked, another celebrity, governor, senators, mere congressional representatives, and no apparent mere mortals like Jay and I. We conferred what to do. Drinks were flowing there, and all the beer imaginable was available, and there were delightful trays of hors d'oeuvres just swimming around. And we, who had lived on the leftover fries and rolls of others for days, were hungry. Yes, we had plowed a hole right into the heart of their security. in that we had stumbled into George McGovern's private reception for the big shots who made it happen. Yes, even those who may have worked against him, but were too important not to invite. We straightened our crumpled shirts, fixed our ties, and smiled big, so as to convince those who just might fixate on the fact that we were without the suit coats that all others seemed to be wearing. Well, to convince them that we too belonged. And what the hell? Everybody seemed to be slapping someone else on the back and mouthing expressions like congratulations or great job. We could manage that. I then quickly moved to temper our strategy, for I could see Mankiewicz, who ought to have known and probably did know everyone in that room, intemperately looking me over from a distance. It was, I surmised, oh, who the hell are you, look? So we got our beer, grabbed a bit of food, and retreated to the human shield or phalanx of the body-on-body crowd of people by the other entrance. Yes, that was it. Disappear into the crowd, take cover, lean against the most distant of all possible walls. Marlo Thomas, Shirley, and Gaylord would just have to wait for us until later. From there, keeping to ourselves, we heard all of the speeches and even felt free to be free when Gibson wandered in, surprised as he was by my presence. I belonged to him, and Jake could claim him as well. But as it happened, we liked the crunch of the entrance and exit no matter, and we hung tight to it. Before long, suddenly standing, no more than 6 feet away from me, was Kathleen Kennedy, the oldest daughter of our Bobby with the tears glistening in his eyes. She was asking McGovern staffers if there was any other way to return to her 11th floor room. She told them, to avoid the hundreds of reporters and dozens of cameras that stood between her and the many elevators. She looked genuinely concerned, worried. Suddenly, without even thinking about it, I got as close as I could to her and said, Miss Kennedy, you don't know me, but you can trust me, and I do know a way out of here. In a flash, I told her just why that was so, and she simply and broadly smiled. And she took my hand when I pulled her into the darkness, and she held it when we descended the stairs, and she spoke briefly about how very uncomfortable she was with the spotlight. And I rather told her just how deeply I adored her dad, and their having so very generously shared him with us. Pushing the door open to her floor, gentleman that I was, I just intended to walk her to her door, but 2 burly security guards near tackled me, upon which tides turned and she rather rescued me, securing me free passage back up. She gently kissed me on the cheek and thanked me, upon which I said, oh no, thank you. Strange, minimal, not so very important, I know. But through his Kathleen, I had in a mystical, tangible, even magical way, touched her dad, touched Bobby, who had loved her so. I like to believe that he might well have been smiling that haunting smile of his at the both of us. Just one of life's small coincidences or blessings that forever loom large in the head to make gentle the life of the world indeed. I had just helped Bobby's daughter Kathleen get home, making me part of the family, however distant and removed, family, to make gentle the life of the world. Take care. I'll be back with you soon. Thanks so much for taking the time to listen. Greatly, greatly appreciated. Bye now.